Good afternoon, YouTube. So this is the same flat rate shipping crate that I've showed you in a few earlier videos, and I just wanted to show you the last configuration we have set up for this one. In this configuration we can ship two different sizes of these machined steel weights. So we hold 16 machined parts in there. We have two different sizes of these parts. There's the smaller one in length, but it's larger in diameter, as you can see there. And what these are shift weights for Volkswagen Rabbit, Scirocco, Jetta, those type of vehicles, the 80s and early 90 models that have the shift linkage. And I'll show you what these look like assembled later in the video. But yeah, these are machined steel. They weigh about 1.25 pounds, 1.5 pounds each, and machined out of one piece of steel. And we put them in the flat rate crate, and then put these two plates across here, which are drilled to hold the threaded ends. That keeps the threaded ends from getting beaten up. And then on the side of the crate over here we have a set of holes for screws that hold them in this position, and then we also have a set of holes a little farther up to hold them for the shorter weights. And I think that this runs around 30 pounds. With these we could probably put more in, but then the box gets so heavy, you know, you start approaching maybe 60 pounds if you were to double these up. Just gets to be too heavy to carry and move around, and then it's also more likely to get damaged in shipping, because if you drop this one at 30 pounds it'll hold up, but if you double the weight in there it just gets to be too heavy. You know, technically you can go up to 70 pounds in the flat rate boxes, but if you start pushing that limit you find out there's other issues you run into. So we kind of keep it to about 30 pounds in this setup. So you've got about 16 weights, 1.25 pounds each, so there's probably about 20 pounds of product, and then I think there's about 12 pounds in the empty crate. So yeah, it's probably around 32, 33 pounds when it's all packed up. But yeah, let me get this unpacked and then I'll show you what we do with these after I get them in. These are just raw machine parts. So on this one we start out with a rod of cold rolled steel, and then we machine it down with a taper on there, and then this end is threaded in M8 by 125 thread. Before we assemble them, we clean these and paint them up with some finished paint, and so I'll show you that part next. Okay, we got the box unloaded and put back together, so that's the way it goes back in the flat rate box, all empty. And so I gotta get that off to the post office today. And what we're left with is we get a bunch of these. These are the bare steel parts. So these are the ones I just got in, and let me show you what we do with them here. So we go and clean them up and paint them. What this part does, this is what we call our weighted shift rod. This is what's called the relay shaft in your vehicle, and the way this works is there's a shaft that runs back to your gear shift lever, which would be way back in between the passenger and driver's seat in your vehicle. The way that works is that rod pulls and pushes on this little rubber ball here. This relay shaft is held in a cage, and these are some of the bushings we actually make to replace the squishy rubber ones that are used in the OEM setup. So there's a cage holding this vertically, and when you pull and push on this bottom ball, this part here swings side to side, and that would normally have this steel rod in there. And then the other end over here that is hanging in the air would be attached to your transaxle on the selector lever, and then that shifts between first gear, and then when you take your shifter and go from forward to back, swings this over to the other side, and that's what selects second gear. So you have first gear, second gear, and then there's another part of the shift linkage that changes between first, second, and then third and fourth, and then you have fifth gear and reverse are two separate gears. So that's how that works, and this is the factory part. It's just an 8mm steel rod, and what this thing does, we replace the 8mm rod with a 1" or 25mm diameter steel rod. This is just a couple ounces. This is about 1¼ pounds, about 20 ounces. And then we put these ball and socket rod ends on to eliminate the squishy rubber bushings that the OEM setup uses. So instead of relying on muscle force on the gear shift, you're relying on the mass times the velocity of the shift rod to make your shift, and that makes your shifting just much more crisp, because instead of having to force it into gear, you just get this weight moving, and because it's heavy, it wants to keep moving. So anyway, that is where we take these from. So I take the raw part, I paint them, and then I add all the hardware. And one thing we do is we supply a little metal bushing here in the middle to replace the plastic bushing that would normally be in here. So you can pop this part out, and then this part here, we have a metal bushing that fills this large hole, and then you put the nut on. But now that creates just a very secure mount there. You've got a solid metal to metal connection here, because you've got that metal bushing inside, and then you've got this metal ball stud and a metal rod end here, and that whole connection is just completely solid. There's no give to it at all, because everything's a metal to metal part. So this part, even when it fits inside the original bushing, is sloppy. It has to be, because one of the problems is, as this shifts, it's got to move. Because you've got this part that's swinging side to side. This other end is on a swinging thing as well. So this thing has to move up and down, back and forth, and it's got to have a lot of motion here. And the way they did it in the factory setup was they just made it sloppy. They added extra room here, so there was enough room for this to wiggle around and not bind up. So you can see how this is a much more secure setup. We've got a nut, there's a spacer, a washer, then the ball stud in the middle, and I'll show you what that looks like here. I'll pull the pin out. That's the whole setup we have. We've got this machined metal ball stud. There's this machined rod end that has a spring clip inside there, and then on the outside there's a retaining clip that keeps it in, and these two just snap together here. There we go. So you just snap that on, and then we have the little clip goes in here, right there. And at that point, this thing is not coming apart. So there's our improved Volkswagen shift kit. So anyway, I will get this stuff put away, and I'll show you the rest of the linkage in a separate video, so stay tuned for that. I'll put links to that over here on the left side. If you have any questions or comments, post up in the comment section below the video description. And as always, thanks for watching.